we are VortiX versus Baltune, and this is the set that we were supposed to start with, and you might be wondering why VortiX is up 1-0. So, long story short, folks, unfortunately Baltune had trouble showing up, and the set had to be delayed. Per the rulebook, the admins enforced a 1-point advantage for VortiX, essentially meaning that Baltune conceded game number 1 due to him not showing up in time. So this series will unfortunately begin from a 1-0 scoreline. Nonetheless, we do have the 5 maps baked over here, which actually makes things very awkward if you think about it. It's we have 5 maps for 4 games.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting, that's for sure.
But Frisian Marshes, where have I seen this before, Soccerton?
I don't know. Was it game 1 of last series? I think it was. But quick look at the draft here. One thing I'm noticing off the bat is that this time it was Templars and HRE both were banned off the bat, as well as Zhu Shi. So not Templars for VortiX though. VortiX banned Chinese. So
he's got Templars. I want Templars. Yeah. That's all I want. But we're gonna head into game number 1. We're going to head into game number 1. Frisian Marshes Malians versus Japanese is our first game here, folks. Welcome to what is essentially game number 1 of this series, but in practice, it's game number 2. VortiX versus Baltune. VortiX with the color red playing as the Malians down south, and to the west, we have Baltune playing as the Japanese in green. Japanese does not surprise me much. Malians does. I've seen Malians being played on all maps practically.
Yeah,
I'm still a little surprised about Malians being picked on this map, Frisian Marshes. I don't know if it's just the fact that Malians are generally good on all maps and there are more suitable maps for the Malians than this one is, or whether this Malian pick is just a little underwhelming on this map. Could be a combination of both. One thing that's a little awkward is that the cattle play is a little less fancy when you have so much shorefish on the map.
Yeah, that's the big difference, right? Why maybe Malians might not feel like a premier civ on this map is that there's just so much food anyway, that getting extra food, like, it's nice, but doesn't seem like it's a huge benefit. But we'll see how that plays out as Baltune opts to go for a dock immediately on the closest pond with that villager. And that's going to probably be seen here by VortiX. I'm curious if he gets close enough to take a look at that. It's kind of going around instead. Walking around, he's gonna see it, and there it is. You never know. Is he gonna get quite outside the range? But he does know the play that Baltune's going for a fishing ship or 2 here. Yeah, well, a tower on the mine. Interesting. Then cancels it though. Okay. What's VortiX cooking up here? Changes his mind. I wonder if seeing the dock change the calculus of whether or not he needed that tower, because obviously if your opponent's investing in wood for a dock and for ships, you don't really need to defend that gold. You're not going to get pressure early. It's just not going to come. So therefore, why build the tower? And that must have been the thought process for VortiX.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. If there's a dock going up, there is no way you're going to get Dark Age spears. And you never know, especially with Japanese. It's not inconceivable. I genuinely wonder if a tower is still in play because the Shinobi, though. Shinobi would be an quite interesting way of playing this for Baltune, come to think of it.
Yeah, it would, and there is kind of an option for it, right? There's enough food that a Kura Storehouse... Kura Storehouse is always going to give you a benefit, but here with how much food there is out there, there could be reason to think... But I still expect the Kura Storehouse, but I would not be overly surprised to see the ninjas coming out on the field.
Yeah,
I just enough though,
I just wonder if the investment is worth it, because on the other hand, Kura Storehouse, it's an immensely valuable landmark, considering that you can condense a lot of your food eco close to your base. This map has a lot of food, but you have to work for it and you have to fight for it. Having a condensed food eco inside your base with your Kura Storehouse and also an initial buff on the wood income is quite valuable, and I don't know if you want to give that up for the Kuka Township and the Shinobi.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Getting the free farm transition is so huge. Even and like you said, you have to fight for the food on this map. There is a ton of it, as we see the Kura Storehouse being dropped down. No real surprise there. I think we just like the scene. We want to see that the ninjas because they're just funny, right? They're fun to see, but it's a meme. We want to see it because it's kind of a meme, right? And there may be some fringe plays where they would work, but this thing just provides so much more value. And you know, in that same vein, that's kind of why you might want to pick Malians on a map like this. Yes, there's lots of food, but to your words again, you got to fight for it. Whereas a cow boom is a cow boom. It's kind of, you can do that more passively. And so that could be the draw to pick Malians on this map. Scout doing some harassment there. Not going to get a whole lot done, more just being annoying, if anything. I like the placement of that Kura storehouse right on the wood, because it also works as a drop-off location. Also nice and tucked in the back, so it's going to be very defendable when those farms start popping up as well. Meanwhile, stable coming out. Are we going to see pro scouts? Looks like getting the upgrade for the scouts right away, at least. And now, if you're Japanese, are you playing to deny pro scouts? The answer is most likely yes.
Yep.
As we see pro scouts clicking up. So again, if you're Japanese, then you're playing to deny the pro scouts if you can. So I'm trying to think of what your options there would be. Yumi Ashigaru are cheap, but maybe too slow to deal with that.
So here's the thing. Are you concerned about the pro scouts in a direct way? That's what I'm thinking. Like, so here's the thing with the pro scouts at the Malians. Because you get warrior scouts, your scouts are actually combat capable. Which means that you cannot just fight them off with, like, let's say, a single horseman. At the same time, I'm wondering if it actually even makes sense to try and go spears. It's just way too slow and sluggish for a big map like this. I'm thinking more along the lines of getting 1 or 2 horsemen out and just trying to limit their movement, trying to make sure that they don't pick up all 4 deer packs. As long as you pick up 1 or 2, I think Baltune is happy with that, and indeed he's going to start with the horsemen. I think if you're Baltune, you're trying to rush castle here and just trying to essentially minimize the damage from the pro scouts build. Speaking of which, right now they're not even moving towards the carcasses because they're still torching the landmark. Pro scouts just finished, so that's going to soon change.
Honestly, I'm not sure that torching the dock's a ton of value unless they get it down. Those ponds of fish don't have that much food in them. If he eats them up quick enough, like, at what point, it's like, okay, I ate all the fish. I mean, there's still quite a bit there. He definitely wants to keep this thing alive for another minute or two, but in like a minute or so, it's not going to matter as much.
You could argue that trading this dock for the scouts not picking up carcasses is not that bad of a deal for Baltune. Remember, Pro Scouts is an awfully expensive technology, even though you do have the passive gold income for VortiX that helps you get it. Still, you don't want to just have your scouts standing idle right now. I'm a little puzzled about the archer pick. Maybe he expected Donsos. And it's kind of being mismicroed right now. I feel like by Baltune, he should have pulled back those horsemen a little sooner. He needs to fight in groups. Scouts are low HP here for VortiX, but Baltune is really heavily outnumbered. I think he's a little panicked about losing this dock in a way.
I don't think it's the worst loss. I mean, you got to make sure you get that last drop off, but you've gotten a decent amount of value out of it already. I mean, ideally, of course, you'd like to have it eaten all the fish up first. Then it's really not a loss at all. But at this point, the Yumi Ashigaru, I had a feeling he'd go Yumi's, and I definitely agree with you. It feels like an odd choice right now still. It doesn't, like, I'm sure it could scale up really well later, but right this minute, it doesn't feel ideal.
Yeah, come to think of it, you're doing Yumi against a Civ that can go javelins, which feels super awkward, to say the least. It's not going to be a disaster necessarily, especially because there are no javelins out there just yet, but I'm just looking at the resource distribution. VortiX is halfway up to Castle. VortiX has pro scouts and he's about to ferrying carcasses, whereas on the other side I see 8 Yumi archers, which are notoriously bad in low numbers. Yumi is a flood unit, and Yumi is desperate for upgrades, so a handful of early game Yumis are... they actually have negligible contributions to fights, really.
Yeah, he would have been better off with spears here just to defend the dock, because now it's been destroyed. He has to invest another 150 wood to build it back again. Or it's 150 wood, right? I'm not wrong, I think. But he's got to invest again, to build that up, and those idle ships now are just taking their time sitting there. Yeah, Yumi feel like an odd choice. It's like, I like Yumi Ashikato, don't get me wrong. I just don't know if I like him right here, right now.
Yeah, my concern with the Yumi is that, okay, it's nice, but what is the Yumi going to achieve in the next few minutes? Because if you don't achieve anything, VortiX is going to be up to Castle Age with veteran javelins, and then you're not going to have anything that really deals with that.
Yeah, Deer coming in now for VortiX. He's gotten quite a good pack there. And he's keeping up the pressure on Baltune's side as well. Just being annoying and risky kind of, and just making it difficult. As the Farimba garrison pops up, VortiX immediately up to castle. Baltune's still a minute or so behind. Now, what if you're playing as VortiX? What choice are you making in the Farimba?
Good question. Frankly, I don't think it matters. Like, you know, the thing is that, assuming that you do not have any contributions from your landmark to your military, you're still fine. You have warrior scouts, which are practically cav units against the Yumi, and you have javelin throwers. So, I don't think he even needs to rush a decision, dare I say. And I don't think this decision should be governed by the pressure that he's facing right now.
Yeah, the temptation would be to go for the jabs, right? Because there's Yumi Ashigato on the field right now. But that's a good point. You know, if you can you take care of this with what you have? I mean, you can pop out some Sofa pretty quickly. In fact, VortiX is already adding in some jabs, and it looks like the javelin choice from what I'm seeing. So he'll give in to the temptation to go for it right away, and maybe that could still be the right call for sure. I mean, that leaves Baltune with a unit that does not trade very well here in a second, with the Yumis being already kind of weak. And then it also makes Onimusha difficult to transition into. Not that he really wants to go into Onimusha, but then you're left with what? You're left with Mounted Samurai, essentially, and that's about it. Loading gate going up right now. And I'm guessing the first Yodashido is going to have to pop in one of those stables. Imagine that. You need Mounted Samurai. That's almost a must-have right now.
Now, Mounted Samurai is not a unit I hate here. Because there are few units. So first off, when it comes to Malians, usually what they do, although that's more common for the cow boom setup, usually what they do is essentially pivot into Sofa once they get mid-Castle Age. Because with imported armor, Sofas are immensely powerful and they are very spammable. But I actually love Mounted Samurai against Sofa, so I don't think you actually do that if you're VortiX. Which makes me feel like we might just want to go heavy on either Danso plus Javelin, or perhaps we're doing Danso plus Poison Arrow Archers. Poison Arrows would be really good against Mounted Samurai.
Yeah, they are tanky, though. I mean, I don't know if I want to be making archers against Mounted Samurai. I mean, they are...
Oh, yeah,
with the
you need Dansos in front no matter what.
Yeah. Well, and he doesn't have anything for that yet, so he's got jabs. I'm thinking Mounted Samurai could be a pretty good force to reckon with, especially with the Yumi. And, you know, there is kind of a chance that Baltune could go for like a 1-1-1 composition, add some spears in as well. I do like his Yumi mass, however, right now. He does have a good amount of them. 27, 5 more on the way. Even with the jabs on the field, there's only 16 of them. You get some Mounted Samurai with these horsemen right there we're looking at. It's not a done deal. Baltune's in a decent spot right now. It felt kind of bad. He does put the Yodashido into the town center. You don't see that every single day.
Wow. Yeah, it's because he's not making Mounted Samurai whatsoever. Usually you put it in the stable because you want to get the Mounted Samurai as quickly as possible, but that's not the case. He's going Yumi. This is such an awkward composition, and it could be his downfall if he relies too much on Yumi and VortiX is just pumping out more javelins. Frankly, now Sofas are coming in. One thing to keep in mind, though, is that even with imported armor, generally speaking, more arrows is better than a slightly higher base attack for archers. So a huge mass of Yumi actually does better against Sofas with imported armor than a smaller clump of, let's say, normal archers do.
Horseman looking at the jabs. Don't want to take the fight just yet. Those poison darts do some serious damage after the fact. Yeah, a Horseman Yumi, kind of almost like a Zerg Rush kind of vibe, right? Of just massing up a number of units.
It's actually a really good comparison that I did not even think about. I wonder if that's the mindset. Just like, we're looking at a huge map, and the front of your base is generally open, so you're getting to the point where if you can flood units, you can easily catch your opponent off guard. The problem is that I just feel like you would have benefited so much more from like 5 mounted samurai right now.
Yeah, that was an interesting action we just saw too with that horseman. The Javs threw it on the horseman and they had the poison darts. That horseman was dead anyways, and they threw another shot and hit it. They could have had 2 for the price of 1, but instead they hit the same horseman again. That was already doomed to die from the poison. An interesting interaction to see. That's one risk of javelin throwers, is that they can overkill things, right? And that's what we mean when we say overkill, is that they're hitting something too much. There's too many of them all firing at the same unit, as opposed to, you know, evenly spreading their damage against multiple units at the same time.
Yeah, that's a huge thing. It's often an overlooked detail of microing these fights. If you have a high base DPS unit, and you just select your whole army, right-click the opponent, you do an awful lot of overkill damage, so you actually have to kind of spread out your micro. A move is slightly better, but the best case scenario is that you can spread out your damage output manually to maximize the actual damage output and minimize the damage lost with the overkill damage.
Baltune's doing a good job of getting a lot of these eco upgrades behind all this. And his eco is slowly but surely evening up. He's evened up the villager count now, despite the Vill's deaths. That's going to be thanks to the Yodashido in the town center. Here comes the engagement now. Horseman and Sam's trying to catch up. They do get a good charge and brace onto it.
Yeah,
Baltune backing up, though, not wanting to overstay his welcome.
So here's the thing. The mounted samurai act as really good tanks over here, and again, against a huge flood of units, a handful of javelins isn't the best solution. Right now the numbers are good for VortiX, but it's not like 10 javelins will hold off 40-something Yumi, and keep in mind that these units are also buffed by a bannerman. It's a Yumi bannerman, so the archers are buffed, the cavalry is not.
But can the Sofa break through? It's getting really tight up top in the front. There's only a couple mounted samurai left. There's a lot of Sofa, however, and the javelins do high enough base damage to snipe off the mounted samurai. And now the front door's wide open. Baltune's got nowhere to run.
I absolutely hate that Baltune pulled away the archers before sniping 4 of the low HP mounted samurai, and he bails. I wonder what his settings look like for the HP bars being shown, because half of those Sofas were practically dead. If you look at that fight without the health bars, you say, oh shoot, I cannot stop this. If you look at the HP bars, it's not so one-sided. At least 4 or 5 of those Sofas would have died in one volley. And then that fight is not as one-sided as it looks. I still think that VortiX had the upper hand. But it certainly feels like Baltune's hopes were not entirely lost, I felt like.
Yeah, it didn't look great, though. I mean, there was a lot of jabs. But like long term, yeah, he could have let, you know, his town center fire hold off and, you know, kept in that a little bit. I'm wondering if he didn't know how many. He probably didn't know that there was not a cow boom behind this. If you are in that situation and you think there's a cow boom going on behind as well, you might feel like you're really far behind.
Yeah, again, a lot comes down to how you perceive that fight.
Mm-hmm.
If your vision is, oh shoot, I still face 8 Sofas with almost full HP and 20 javelins, you say, yeah, I'm done. But if you look at it and say, wait a minute, I could pick off 4 or 5 Sofas, fall back a little, then maybe there's a chance. And again, you have a good point there as well. You need to know what's behind this eco-wise. If you're afraid there's a cow boom, then you might indeed think that, you know, there's going to be no chance of coming back to this. This is the fight I want you to look at. Right now, the Sofas are full HP. And then in that subsequent fight, we already have a lot of low HP Sofas, and this is where a lot of them get extremely heavily battered, but they do not get picked off. Look at all those Sofas in the middle. They're practically dead, but they will stay alive for the entirety of this fight, even through this retreat. Most of those Sofas are dead, and this fight looks totally different if you consider those HP bars versus not considering them.
I think the tricky thing is, though, is you have a hard time standing and fighting with those with the javelins picking you off behind it, right?
Oh, certainly. I feel like one thing that could have been done is maybe Baltune could have tried picking those off while the fight was still going on. He tried to save the archers instead. I don't blame him for it. I think he felt like he is in the risk of just losing his whole army.
Mm-hmm.
But nonetheless, javelins aren't particularly awesome when it comes to diving deep in your base and torching down buildings.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
It's a little tricky. I feel like, this wasn't one of those GGs where there was no mathematical chance of coming back. Obviously, we're not in the positions of the players, and maybe he felt like his chances were all over. But from an outside perspective, it certainly felt like there would have been options to come back, perhaps.
I would have liked to seen Baltune have maybe, I was mentioning that 1-1-1 comp. If he had some spears, that would have cleaned up the sofa a lot quicker. And then he could have maybe focused some of his Sams and horsemen onto those jabs a little bit more. And then maybe, again, he might not have known that there really wasn't much of a cow boom behind that yet. So that could affect your vision of it.
Well, that takes us into Gorge here, and we have French from Baltune coming out against VortiX's Byzantines. We've seen a setup before.
Yeah,
similar to this. It was Jeanne d'Arc versus Biz, but it was on a fundamentally different map. This one is much, much more open in the middle, and it's not something that you commonly see on a map like Gorge. Generally speaking, this map favors tempo civilizations, and Byzantines does not necessarily strike me as one. It's a more defensive civ at the beginning of the game. So I'm curious how VortiX is going to play this on Gorge specifically. I like Byzantines against the French. I absolutely love them in this matchup. But it's a little surprising to see them on Gorge. So perhaps it's more a counter pick rather than just vaulting in and saying Byzantines are good on this map. It might just be a direct counter to what you anticipate your opponent picking.
Yeah. Of course, this is game 2, but the score is already 2-0 because of Baltune being late and getting docked a point, not making the time to start originally. So if anyone confused about why it's 2-0 already after one game played, that is why. We've got a couple seconds left before we get into Gorge. I feel like this is a fun matchup to watch. I really enjoy watching Byzantines and either French or Joan of Arc go against it. I always love seeing the interaction because both these civs, like you mentioned, it's a very evenly matched matchup when it was Joan of Arc against Byzantines. I think Byzantines has a bit of an edge, I think, especially if you're a player who's good at defending. I think you've got a slight edge. But it's fun to watch. This is a fun matchup to watch, in my opinion.
Indeed, it's going to be a fun one. We head into Gorge here for our next game of the series. Byzantines versus French. We have VortiX playing as the Byzantines in red, and on the other side, Baltune as the French in green. Baltune spawning into the south, and in the northeast, we have VortiX in red.
Standard opening for Byzantines, building the house, the 2 mining camps, and here's the first cistern with all the stone that provides. Yeah, always fun when you get a spawn like this where you have like the wood lines behind and one like pretty much right in front. It makes it easier to wall in a little bit.
It's funny you say that because walling is one thing that we do not commonly see on this map.
Yeah, and that's kind of why. But with this, we got something that's kind of already in the front as a buffer. It makes it more feasible. That said, I don't know that I'll expect to see a whole bunch of walls right off the bat. But if you ever need, like, he could short wall, for instance, that stone to the wood right there and provide himself a little more space if he needs.
The funny thing I like to say is that this map either has 0 walls or you have 7 layers. Because this map either finishes in sub 20 minutes and we have feudal age fighting, not much walling going on, or you're going to have the players digging in and just using all these small forests in the middle and the cliffs as well to just completely cut the map in half and then set up themselves up for like a late Imperial slugfest.
Yeah, you mentioned that you don't see walls much on this map, and I was going to say, well, you can, just not around the base. Sometimes they just do the full half wall around the map, but yeah, exactly like you say. All the sheep, of course, on this map tend to be up on the wings, as we see Baltune getting his fair share. That's actually kind of important too. Having a good amount of food at home as French does matter when you're trying to be aggressive. I find that as French and Joan of Arc, it really does help to have a little extra sheep if you can. Obviously, you can go out to play the boar and you might go for pro scouts. That's often why they do it too, is you want a lot of food at home so you can focus on the raiding and focus on the aggression. VortiX Scout is kind of trailing behind a little bit of Baltune Scout too. It looks like, I don't know if he's got as many sheep. Yeah, only 3. Hey, I think he got caught behind. Look at his scouting path. Went right behind where Baltune went.
Yeah, that's the tricky part when it comes to using just one scout. If you have an unlucky pattern, or if your opponent kind of anticipates what pattern you will use and just undercuts yours, you're going to miss out on a lot of sheep. And that's going to be very problematic for the French player if that happens to them, because the French will be so much more reliant on that sheep food income than the other player, the Byzantines, will.
Yeah, and thankfully for Baltune, he's the one who's ahead, right? Because Byzantines, you know, you don't get your sheep, you don't love it, but you also, you got berries, right? And you've got the olive oil. So sheep are a nice addition, but I've often seen many games where you don't even eat all your sheep. Like, you're already moving on to other resources to get the olive oil. So they're a good fallback, but not nearly as essential as it would feel for French. And Winery and School of Cavalry coming up right now. So standard stuff from both players thus far. And again, I guess as far as contract goes, I think Javelin is the way to go, but maybe we see Keshix? I don't know. I think Javs is the way to go here.
Yeah, probably. If you get Javs, you automatically shut down the French archer play. And French usually play this matchup with knights and archers. Yeah. So the real question immediately becomes, for the French, how do I deal with Limitani? Limitani Javelin is something that the French cannot really crack until Men-at-Arms. And even then, Men-at-Arms just feels like a weird choice for a French player. It's, generally speaking, that Dunso Javelin combo of the Malians is something that's the bane of all cavalry-heavy civilizations, particularly the French. And the Byzantines can mimic that build quite a bit with their own Limitani and the Javelins. The only trick is that you have a much more limited amount of Javelins than what you have in Malians. So, speaking of which, I'm just now realizing VortiX is going to be potentially playing Javelins 2 out of 2 games.
That's an interesting fact. We do see Pro Scouts coming out for Baltune right now. No surprise there. It's just the bonus of the extra food is so good. First night, they just kind of run right past each other. Hello, hello, goodbye, goodbye. Well, and, you know, think about it, too. Like, you mentioned that Men-at-Arms feels kind of awkward for French. It can feel pretty dang awkward to go Men-at-Arms. It can also be unexpected. As we see the first dive coming in, Knight doesn't quite. Great micro by VortiX to save the Vil, able to body block between the berries. And however, one does go down. Baltune gets his fair share of the prize and is able to bounce out. Being really pesky here on these forward berries for VortiX. It's another one almost down. As I was saying, Men-at-Arms, if you ever switch, do like a surprise switch into Men-at-Arms, like with a quick castle out of French, I'm not going to say it's a great, you should always do this strat, and by no means, that's usually not the case. But every now and then you can find a little window where you can surprise an opponent with French Men-at-Arms. It's one of those things people get so stunned to see it. Especially in like ladder games, like they just don't expect to see French Men-at-Arms. It can be kind of effective in a situation like this, if you can get Byzantines to fall behind a little bit.
The thing I never liked about those Men-at-Arms is that even if you surprise your opponent, there's a finite amount of economy damage that you can do because your Men-at-Arms are just simply too slow. So, that guy was taking the day off. We saw that.
Union break. Union break. No, I agree. Men-at-Arms are just really slow. Like it's kind of almost like a meme-y kind of play, like kind of a meme to do it. But sometimes you can find a good window for it, and it can be very surprising. But yeah, overall, it's tough to want to go into that as French. There's a reason why they don't normally do it.
It certainly feels like a setup where you A, need to be able to flood them, and B, it's not going to be a game of killing villagers. It's going to be a game of just marching into the enemy base and taking it all out.
Exactly. Baltune's sitting on just 2 knights right now, trying to get another villager. That's a second villager killed. Not doing a ton of damage, but being annoying. And he's doing all this while getting all of the carcasses he wants behind this. Pay attention to them. Baltune's macro right now is pretty dang precise.
The problem that you're facing here, if you're Baltune, is that if you're not trading with the javelins whatsoever, eventually the count is going to be so massive that you cannot fight into it. The javelins scale a lot more rapidly than archers do. So the longer you drag this out, the worse it's going to get in essence.
Yeah, you almost have to rip the Band-Aid off at some point with these, because again, the javelins, you're right, they hit that critical mass, and they're really, once they do, it feels like there's nothing you can do, especially if there's just a couple of spears, a couple of Limited to bolster them up. It becomes this just nasty machine that you can't break into.
And again, as we talked about this in the first series, it takes a long time to build those javelins with the Byzantines. So it's more like you're getting continuous power spikes every few minutes or so. And when you get that, it's going to be difficult to push into you. If there is not enough aggression from the opposing player that trades off against those javelins, then you kind of eliminate this whole problem of the slow production for the javelins, because you will always have enough.
Some skirmishes happening out here in the open now. This feels like an opportunity for Baltune to maybe out-micro VortiX if you can find the time, because when these units being spaced out in the open field...
All right, back we go. Bit of a running around over here. Luckily, you did not miss anything, so if you have your friends watching, tell them to just press F5 and refresh the page. We are back. All right.
So what was I saying?
I've no idea. I absolutely forgot about what we were talking about.
We got a bit of a skirmish coming up north as the Knights trying to get into the base. Exposed villagers, not a lot of Limited. I think he could sneak a couple Knights past if he wanted to. He doesn't.
That's one of the... VortiX is going a little aggressive with his army, and that leaves some of his troops or some of his villagers back at home exposed. But over time, he's bringing in the Limitan. He's actually has enough, I think, to repel this attack soon. Remember, he could also get the damage output buff for the villagers. And indeed, he's going to have enough to push this away. Critically, there is not a single archer here for Baltune. And I think VortiX was just waiting for the archers to move out, and he tried to intercept them. He's actually going to just miss them. They headed out to the north, and right now VortiX is heading south.
Yeah, this could work out well for Baltune if he can just pick one of these smaller groups out. This one right here, if he can pick this group off, this will be huge. They see the Knights. Knights are going to take the brace on to the spears. The Donzo's holding, Limited holding on. They're going for the Jows behind it, though, if they can get there. Limited dropping like flies. This is a really good window for Baltune.
This is a great window, and, well, the Limitani are the smaller losses. The key thing here is that VortiX managed to save the Javelins, but these are the exact fights that he cannot afford to take. You cannot have small groups of Javelins, because if they get traded off, you're going to struggle reproducing them. And that's exactly the kind of fight that VortiX is not supposed to be taking. Now, he feels like there is blood in the water, and he's taking this fight because he wants to sandwich this army from the south. He's got his forces coming in. And I think he's going to be able to accomplish that. So, it looked a little dicey, but now he manages to surround this army over here, and it's going to be difficult for Baltune to pull these archers back.
Yeah, Baltune kind of marched those archers right in the middle, didn't do anything with them, and walked right away as they started getting pinched. I felt like there was definitely a really good opening. They could have picked off a couple more units, and they just kind of walked in there without doing anything. That was really dangerous for VortiX. That was really, really dangerous.
Yeah, well, some could say calculated, some could say risky. Nonetheless, at the end of the day, the thing that you have to look into is that it worked out for him. But it certainly felt like he rolled the dice, and I think right now he's trying to bait out the Knights. He was intentionally splitting his forces. He was trying to bait the Knights into charging and then try to jump them with the Limitani.
Yeah, the Knight numbers are not very high right now, right? Meanwhile, Javelin numbers are in a pretty good number. He did lose a couple, and he's going to pick off a couple of those archers. They're going to try and stand and fight, but they really can't stand here.
Reinforcements do come in, though, and this could be a surprise here. I don't think VortiX expected that, and now, with all the Limitani gone, suddenly this could be a cleanup. Behind this, Baltune wanted to go Castle Agent. You have to say this. I think VortiX overstayed his welcome, and he certainly felt caught off guard by the new wave of archers. Nice little ambush here by Baltune. Castle Age is also coming in for VortiX, though, so this is the worst time for him to lose his army. He might manage to save most of the Javelins, though, so This actually looked a lot worse initially than what it ended up being.
And those javelins are the lifeline, right? Like, because they're so hard to get back again. They take so long to pop out of the mercenary school, the mercenary house. You can't make them back. You can't bring them back as fast. You can't just reinvest immediately. It takes time. So as long as they're alive, however, he's alive, and keeping them alive the way he did was great, because he doesn't mind losing the Limitane, right? Limitane, dime a dozen, you don't care. It's all about the jabs here. But man, Baltune trying to find a window, almost got some pretty good damage done. Feels like VortiX has been just kind of living on the edge a little bit, but managing to walk the tightrope.
Guildhall coming in for Baltune, though, so he opts to go for the more eco-heavy approach. There's going to be no royal bloodlines on his knights for the time being. The javelin numbers have not increased for the last few minutes, though, so casualties somewhat relevant here for VortiX, and he's trying to sneak out with the Monk. Monk sneaks away here. Scout just barely missed it.
That was close.
Problematic detail for VortiX will be that in comparison to the Jeanne d'Arc versus Byzantine matchup we've seen in the first series of the day, this one, you have to fight for your resources a lot more. He needs to grab the relics, he needs to keep these villagers alive, and that's going to be very difficult to do with a slow-moving army. So Baltune is doing the right thing. He's looking for opportunities to hit these villagers. He will need a way more knights, though, and I think he's kind of handcuffed in terms of food income.
Yeah, it feels like, I mean, he had pro scouts. There's another deer pack still in the very far north that he hasn't gotten back home. I'm curious if he's just kind of having a hard time staying on food. Looks like he's on the boar, so food should be taken care of for the time being. But two actually deer packs still on the field on the opposite side. Still bringing back a couple more carcasses. And now gold becoming the next issue as well as he moves on to the 8Ks. Feels like this is kind of that transition point 15 minutes into the game. Guildhall set to food. And some, cataphracts coming out for VortiX. Just a couple of them. He's also got camels in the queue.
Cataphracts. Now, they could be nasty if they charge through all of these archers. I'll give them that.
I like them as a kind of a meat shield, you know? Something for the archers to focus on and not get a lot done with. Eventually, you're going to get the camels out to help debuff the no real knights.
Yeah, that's a fair point you bring up. The cataphracts act as a really good tank here. Knights trying to ambush this. I'm not the happiest with the javelin numbers for VortiX. He's got some more Limitani lagging behind a little. Archers being picked off slow and steady, but the front line is slowly disappearing, and I cannot help but wonder. I think VortiX is overstaying his welcome once again.
Yeah, it feels like an overextension. All that's standing between these javelin throwers and death is a couple of Limitane and those mostly alive cataphracts.
Now this is tricky though.
Alive.
He's got the berries, and the berries create a beautiful choke point. I think that's why he was staying. Makes it more difficult for knights to chase. Most of the archers have also been cleaned up, so the new Limitani that come in will make this chase much, much more difficult. And I feel like I'm repeating myself across this game. Every single time that VortiX feels like he overextended, he somehow gets away with all the important units.
Yeah, he's managed to keep that blob of javelins alive against all odds. They are just risking it all and somehow getting out unscathed. I'm worried that he's gonna get that sense that they're, you know when you start like winning too much, you start thinking that you're invincible, right? I'm worried that those javelins might let it go to their heads here. They gotta stay alive and they gotta be careful. But so far, VortiX has done a really good job of keeping them going. And now the camels and some more Limitane coming in to help support. He needs to keep those numbers up. He needs to keep producing units. He doesn't have a lot in the queue right now.
Yeah, the thing I'm looking at is that while we were talking about all of this, Baltune has 7 villager kills. There's a 17 villager differential between the two players. And right now, VortiX only has he's got 2 relics of a lead. That's going to stay that way most likely with this one coming back for Baltune. Nonetheless, it's a little worrisome for VortiX that he's down by 17 eco, even though the cisterns and the olive oil will make up for some of the difference. It's not like he can afford to take massive casualties now, however. So he needs to be very cautious about taking big losses.
And that's been the case the entire game, right? And somehow he's managed to thread the needle. He now has more Limited, which I like. He needs to make sure that those Limited stay with javelins. He's done a good job of kind of rounding around this wood right here. The night numbers for Baltune are going up. He's got 15, almost 17 now. And there's not, I wouldn't say there's quite enough Limited to suppress, 20 some odd knights if that comes to it. However, the camels are there, so minus like 1/5 of the value there. As big fight comes in, tries to stand and fight.
Do keep in mind, these knights do not have royal bloodlines, something that would be immensely valuable right now. 16 knights with royal bloodlines would be totally different from what we see right now. And Baltune is kind of caught in mid-map with limited positions to fall back to. As long as the camels are alive, these knights also suffer from a debuff, and I don't like this fight at all for Baltune. Seems like he does like it, however.
He's got the knight
trying to
numbers
clean up
eventually.
javelins. A lot of his knights are badly beaten up, though. Look at all those knights with low HP. I feel like Lucifer can, or VortiX, I should say, can finish off so many of these almost dead knights, and indeed, that's the case. The knight numbers look good until you looked at the HP bars.
Yep, and just like you were saying a couple games ago, same kind of situation where it looks good on numbers, but the HP value belies the fact that they're all so weak. And night after night, the charge looks like they went into some machine gun fire, and there is nothing but carnage on the map as the javelins once again survive the fight to tell the tale.
The base damage of javelins is just outright insane. Huge range, great base damage. Against knights that are low on HP, look at this. They're just going to pick it off. It's not like they are archers fighting a knight. They certainly have some level of ability to pierce that armor. And that was the big problem. By the time Baltune cleaned up the cannon fodder, well, I guess I shouldn't call the camels and the Limitonic cannon fodder, but by the time those were cleaned up, many of the knights were very, very low, and the javelins just finished them off. And again, VortiX stands his ground, and he's now threatening that gold mine to the south.
And the reinforcements, just as his numbers were starting to go down a little bit, another group of javelins comes in to bolster the ranks. And once again, now he's just fully Olive Grove transitioned behind this with level 5 Cistern. He's got an AK gold. VortiX is not hurting for a lot. He's got a pretty good split on the relics as well. So if you're VortiX right now, you are very pleased with the outcome at this point.
Oh, certainly. This is the dream scenario for VortiX. And now he's getting a Hero Siphon on. He is going to come in with an attempted push, probably to the south gold mine. There's a fortified tower there. He's going to need some juice to take it out. And then if he can manage that, he can try to hit the wood line. Evacuation underway here for Baltune. He knows he cannot hold that.
I think that boar has been eaten up to the north. I'm trying to see. There's no farm transition coming in. Baltune's need to cash out on his guild hall just to stay alive. He's trying to get some farms going, but he's out of food at the moment.
Yeah, this is the big problem with the French. It's a tempo civilization. You have to dictate the tempo of the game, because if you do not, you run out of food and you will not have any means of re-establishing that. So if you can dictate the tempo of the game with your knights, you can do quite a lot. But it feels like now, especially after those two fights, Baltune is kind of pinned inside his base, and he's just struggling to access food. Gold as well. He's got 2 gold in the bank, a very limited gold income. I like these counter raids, but I feel like they're just too little. And look at that. The scouts are still taking deer carcasses from the other side. That's how bad the food situation is.
Oh, that knight is pesky, but it's only one knight. He's only going to get a couple of kills for the effort, and the cataphract's there to deal with it. So it's annoying for VortiX, but it just feels like the upper hand is still there. He is running a little low on gold. VortiX doesn't have a ton. That was his one main source. But with the frontal push happening at the same time, it feels like he's in a position of power.
Yeah, it's a matter of whether Baltune can clean this army up or not, and I don't think he can. He's got archers only against now 33 javelins, and we talked about this. The big problem with the javelins in the Byzantine army is that they take time to build. But because VortiX preserved those javelins over the course of the entire game, now he's got a death ball of javelins, which is actually much bigger than the archers. Well, not bigger, but still 33 javelins against 42 archers is very heavily favoring the javelins. I like Baltune's idea of trying to vibe economy, though. If he can get some nice worker kills, he could perhaps slow this game down.
Speaking
VortiX
of...
cannot VortiX cannot afford to lose a lot of eco, because then, if he loses a bunch of eco, he's going to have this one push, and that's it. This push is extremely difficult to deal with, but if he loses his entire eco, he's going to have one chance of winning this game, whereas right now, he's got a really good chance of just finishing either now or 10 minutes from now.
Yeah, that raid was a good idea, and he's still trying to get more done, but Akratoy defense and with some other units, it doesn't take much to repel it. Meanwhile, yeah, you can do some raids, but your base is getting its face pushed in as VortiX is just standing in the base and saying, I can be here, and there's nothing you can do about it. Build your keep to the north. What care I for that? As he pushes forward and more in as the main town center starts getting burned down.
He's going for a landmark victory. He's forcing Baltune's hand. If Baltune doesn't fight, he's going to lose his landmarks, and with that, the game. Knights are swinging back from the middle. He's got 10 knights only, Baltune does. And remember, they don't have the royal bloodlines, something that would be immensely valuable right now. Town center is going to go down. A bunch of villagers will pop out, potentially get caught in the crossfire. And the javelins are just absolutely massacring all these archers. Villagers jump out trying to keep the TC alive, but that's just not going to happen. And this fight is looking very, very one-sided right now in the favor of VortiX. The javelin count is still identical. We started at 30-something. We still have 30-something here for VortiX. Heroes Siphon are now just absolutely annihilating the base. House is getting taken out, and I just don't know if there are options here for Baltune. He's archers against a direct counter unit with javelins.
It's tough. He's doing his best trying to raid behind this, right? He's trying to pick off villagers, trying to get a good amount of value. He's gotten 15 for his effort now. Is it enough? It just doesn't feel like enough when your town center's gone, your second landmark's gone, your third landmark is now being forced as a landmark victory. Archers know they have to make their final stand. Javelin throwers happy to take the fight. Archers stepping in. There's no winning for this. I think it's done. And he calls GG, throws in the towel, lets it go, and the series goes to VortiX.
Well. VortiX coming in strong, and gotta say, he's played very clean games across this series. This one, some could say calculated risks. I felt like some of the risks he took would have been too much for me, but he always managed to preserve his javelin count, and that started snowballing things towards the end. Nice villager kills, by the way, by Baltune. So one thing that Baltune did really well was he, across the course of this game, managed to put some pressure on VortiX's eco. I just felt like that one decisive battle that Baltune was always looking for was elusive. Probably his best chance was when he ambushed VortiX to the north. This fight specifically. This was screaming like a fight that VortiX miscalculated. Mm-hmm. He had to be bailed out by new Limitani coming in just in time to preserve those javelins. And then we had this fight here. This looked a little shaky for VortiX. Had to once again flee with the javelins, but it's going to be the fight afterwards where all the knights were so low that they couldn't fight off the javelins anymore.
Yeah, and the Limitani coming in in reserve to help bolster the defense and the attack. Like that was perfect timing for the reinforcements for VortiX to get there, to hold on those knights as the javs just kind of inch their way away while still doing damage. You know, they felt like there were a couple opportunities for Baltune to maybe try and squeeze a win. There was that time where he was pushing into VortiX Vase, and his archers kind of just walked in, did nothing, and had to walk out. There was a couple of slight missed opportunities, and VortiX just seeming to get away with murder time and time again, just walking that tightrope to perfection.
Yeah, exactly. It's there were times where it felt like he was a little overzealous with his army, but he always managed to come out of it, and that's why VortiX is a very difficult player to play against.
Yep, it's
Many
not
players
if you win,
would have miscalculated those fights and just lost their whole army. But he always managed to preserve that, and he was just so relentless and aggressive in this game, manages to finish this series with a clean record. And I do believe that we have VortiX on the line here. So we're VortiX, let's hear what he has to say, as he has now qualified himself for the top 8. Well, hello there. Congratulations.
Hello.
Congratulations for making top 8. So now you join Lucifron as another top 8 player. Let's talk through some of your games here. This was a rather quick series. First off, I want to ask you in general about javelin throwers, because we've seen a lot of that in this series.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much a coincidence. In fact, it's actually a unit I rarely make, even though I really like Byzantine. But right now, the meta is shifting into Lombo, I feel like, most of the time. So it's kind of awkward. Both games I had like javelin thrower spam.
I want to go through game number 2 here, because that had some moments which, from an outside perspective, looked a little shaky. There were times where it felt like you got ambushed a little by Baltune, and his army just looked very intimidating in comparison to yours, but he always managed to preserve those javelin numbers. How did you feel about those fights? Was there ever a moment where you felt like, oh shoot, I miscalculated this and now I need to run?
Yeah, pretty much all game long. I was like, I was all over the place. I think he did a very good job on finding the early villager kills, which is always super annoying for the Byzantine player. But I think I also misplayed oftentimes. Like I just started from the very beginning. I wasn't defending well. I think he got like 2 early villager kills, and then I found myself in a situation where I felt like I had to be aggressive because I was behind. But he also made a really good job on, choosing the exact army he wanted, so that the fights were actually in his favor. He also found like the right windows to raid and stuff. It was I think I played very poorly this game, honestly, but I think he also made a very good job on finding those windows.
All right, so looking ahead over here, you are going to be up against Puppy Paw in the next round. Just by memory, do you happen to know what your overall record is against Puppy Paw?
No, and I don't want to know.
Okay, yeah, you don't want to know.
I guess it's really bad, right? Nah, it's okay, yes. I guess it's really bad, but then again, there's also a lot of minor tournaments, I think. It's always close also. I feel like when it's big series in like important tournaments, oftentimes it's close. And I also beat him like early this year, I think, in the first tournament, even though I lost on the second one. So let's leave it at there. I don't want to know the global score. What is it, like something like, I don't know, 310 or something like that, right?
I will not say anything. Those who actually want, I mean, Wikipedia has awesome logs of that, but indeed, that matchup favors Puppy Paw historically a little. So what are your expectations going into that series? Are you confident about it?
I mean, it's always really hard to play against him. I feel like I probably have to do a lot of research today, because I don't think I've watched any of his series in the tournament. It's always hard. He's really good, obviously. So my expectations, if I don't win, I hope at least I show my best level, because I've been a little bit inconsistent lately. I think if I do, I can win, but obviously it's going to be really hard. So I'll just do my best, and we'll see how it goes.
Well, before we let you go, any message that you want to tell your fans? The people have been cheering all day for you.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, thanks everyone. I know, especially the Spanish-speaking community is always like super hard on me. Like they're always supporting really hard. But everyone really, I really appreciate everyone that supports me and everyone that supported Baltune as well. I think the AoE4 community is very friendly in general, and I think we're kind of lucky to have such a very supporting community. So yeah, thanks everyone for tuning in also to this game that we all love, and that's my last message.
Thank you very much for joining us, and good luck tomorrow in your series. This was VortiX qualifying himself into the top 8.